We are in Acts 16, and you can go ahead and get set up there if you want. We're going to get there in a minute. But I want to ask you this. How can one person change the future of an entire household? How can one person change the future, the forever, the eternity of an entire household? Maybe an important question to preface that question is, what even is a household? We don't even really use this concept in our modern days, this culture that we live in today. It's not a common concept. When we give greetings, we don't say like, hey, how is your household doing? Like, it's not a common address that we would probably deliver in a normal, everyday circumstance. In our culture, we really have this, at least in the Western civilized American culture, we really have, maybe unknowingly, an individualistic mentality. And so we often emphasize what us as individuals do and devalue or de-emphasize how our decisions and our attitudes affect our network, the people that we live life with, our families, and so on. But what if I told you that one person has the ability to reshape the future, the forever, of an entire household? Like, one person can change this household dynamic, and it can have a generational impact. What if I said that? What if I said that you had that ability to make that impact on an entire household, across generations? That you would have the ability to impact the relational health of a household, or the financial stability of a household, or the spiritual trajectory of a household. This is something that is deeply important to God. It is very foundational to what He hopes for His people, what He has intended with the sending of His Son. This is really crucial in understanding how the household concept is important to the heart of God. And it's not just because He has a desire to restore people, but He has a desire to restore entire households and entire generations as a result of those households. So we often think of this individual nature, that this is a me and you God moment, that this is just a two-way street, but really the Lord interacts with us as a conduit, as an access point to influence our whole circle, to our whole world that we live in, so that the whole earth would have the opportunity to be restored into His household. This household that we're talking about here, it's really a micro-institution, if you think about it. A micro-institution that serves as the foundation for all other institutions in society. It serves as the foundation for cities that are formed and that expand and take over entire geographical areas. It eventually evolves into the impact of a state, of the institution of a state, and the economy of the state, the educational structures of that state, the governmental ideology and philosophy. It affects nations, and it eventually goes on to affect the entire world. It all starts at this micro level, the atomic level, if you will, of this micro institution of the household. In the Bible, we see stories all the time addressing this concept of this household. It is actually, the Bible's packed with stories about God's love for households and how He operates through households, not necessarily even through specific individuals, but how He interacts with the intent of working through a household that would expand and multiply and affect an entire nation or the entire earth. We see this initially with Abraham, how God promises Abraham a household. He doesn't have a household. He's married, but they don't have any kids. And He goes to him and He says, Abraham, I'm going to give you a household that's so numerous, it's going to look at the stars. You can look at the stars, and that's going to be the resemblance of your household. And that's how I'm going to work through you to impact the world. If we look at the story of Ruth, we see that Ruth's household is lost and then restored again and redeemed through Boaz and a kinsman redeemer. And we see this is not just a grace and a mercy offered to Ruth, but for Ruth's household. And we look at David, how David is a household that is blessed through generations, that the Messiah is to come through the household of David. And then we look into the New Testament, there's examples there as well. For example, there's an example of a jailer who is a Gentile. He's not a believer, and he's got Paul and Silas in prison, and for some reason, the Lord just takes that moment while he's on duty to break open the doors and to set all the captives free. And at this moment is an opportunity for he has to decide who he will live for. And Paul ministers to him in this moment and says, here, don't end your life. Come listen to me, and I will tell you about the light of the world. I'll tell you about Jesus. And as a result, he and his entire household are redeemed and restored in that moment. A life that was going to be lost is then redeemed and redirected and given over to the Lord. And so we see that this theme of household carries through the entirety of the whole Bible, and it is the way in which God interacts with us, and he transforms the world in which we live in. It is a thread that runs through all of Scripture and through our own lives. And that's why we have to recognize that this isn't just an individual interaction that we have with God, but that God interacts with you for the sake of a household. And maybe not even your household. Maybe there's another household that is to be affected by his ministry to and through you. This whole concept, when we look at the big picture, it teaches us that God is very interested in your household, both in the present and in the future. That he is interested in how things are today in your life, but also the people who will come as an offspring, both your physical and spiritual lineage. It also tells us that God is very interested in the households of the people in your community, the people in your workplace, in your neighborhood, and so on and so forth. He is very interested in the households that exist outside these walls, the people who aren't in a church or aren't in a life group. He is interested in those households too, and he's interested in redeeming those in the same way he affects the households of the Lifeline community. Here at Lifeline, think of it this way. We function in a sort of a way as like a collection, a cluster, if you will, of households that meet together in the same place at the same time for the same purpose with the same level of commitment. As does Southmont Church across the street and all these other churches in our community. They all represent clusters of households that meet together for a common purpose and for a common reason. And it's more than for the reason of proximity or closeness. It's not just because, we happen to live nearby. The fact is that we have people in North Denton, we've got people in Lake Cities, we've got people in probably Lantana or down over in Louisville. We've got people who kind of drive up. Some people come up because they've got family that are here, and they come from all different connecting communities. And there are probably about a dozen or so churches that people could go to on their way here. So the reason that people go to a church to be with their cluster of other households is more than just proximity. It's more than just geographical closeness. And it's more than just convenience, because there's probably more convenient places that you could be on a Sunday morning or a Thursday night or whenever you're gathering with your people. A church like Lifeline becomes a cluster of household because of something else. Because of what we're going to say is our next value today, and that is shared devotion. That devotion is the thing that causes us to want to be together for the same common purpose and the same common intention. We come together because our households unite around this shared devotion. Our devotion to Christ, but also our devotion to each other. That these are my people. That this family is attached to me and me to them. And therefore, we come together, we cluster together for that common purpose. So we're in this series right now, this Kingdom Values series. And we're in week 3. We've talked about empowerment. We've talked about courage. And today we're going to talk about this third value that's going to give shape to who we are as a community. Now, there are different ways that a church or organization can run. And I'm striving here, this is what I'm hoping for as we're going through this series, that we can be a values-driven church. That means that as you possess the values, that you begin to learn them and love these values, they begin to shape who you are, the way that you think, the way that you talk, the decisions you make, the choices you make. And that way, when somebody comes into your life group or visits on a Sunday or whatever social event that it might be going on, that you can be the ambassador, the representative of Lifeline Church, because you know what we stand for, what we fight for, what we believe in, and it doesn't have to come through me on a Sunday morning. It doesn't have to come through your life group leader, because you are the representation of that. And we are a values-driven church. That means it is not dependent on one individual or one experience in order for somebody to really obtain that. It means that you have the ability to deliver that. Now, vision is good, but vision teaches us where to look. It teaches us what we're supposed to see, what we're supposed to envision. A good leadership-driven church is good too, but that just teaches us what we're supposed to do. If we've got good leadership, I know the tasks, I know the objectives, I know the mission at hand, and we need good leadership and we need good vision. But values teach us who we are becoming. Values teach us how to think, how to conceptualize, how to work out the decisions and the choices that we make all on our own, because the values are implanted within us. And this is how a household functions. A household functions most effectively when the values are shared between everybody within the household. It isn't dependent on one individual to tell everybody in the household what to do or where to go or what to look at. But rather, they are imparted values saying, this is who we are, this is what we believe, this is what we stand for, and it is not just my way, but it is our way. And when it is our way, that's when it becomes transformative, and that's when it becomes transferable to other people as well. So this is what we're fighting for here as we talk about these different values, and we're going to talk about this idea of Christian devotion as the central value of our church. And we're going to do a little bit in a minute and differentiate what really like a life of a devotion and a devotional life look like. Because I think we hear this word devotion and we often think of it as an expression or an action rather than an attitude or a heart posture. But we'll get back to that in a second. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at what the disciple Luke has to say to explain this idea of devotion to us. Luke actually wrote the book of Luke, but then he added a part 2 that we call the Acts of the Apostles, or some would like to call it the Acts of the Holy Spirit. In this book, we see like the second installment of what happens after the life and the teaching of Jesus and how the first century church begins to take shape. So in this second writing in the Bible, this book of Acts, there's a story in here. It's probably a less prominent story than is often featured in the book of Acts. But yet it's an important one for us to see a full depiction of what real devotion looks like. So Stephen read this, but we're going to read this again in Acts chapter 16. So you can go ahead and get there. We're going to look at verses 11 through 15. What's interesting about this, what's notable about this story, is that this is a story where there is ministry specifically to women. That there is the central figure in this initiative for the apostles of the first century church is a ministry specifically to women. We don't see that very frequently. Usually it's kind of a male-dominated interaction. But secondly, we see a woman who is a business owner in an economically prosperous situation. And so there is an implication, it is not explicitly stated here, but it is implied that she is an influencer within her household because she is the one that is earning money, and that she is the one that is listening and making the choices in response to the teachings. And so we see this as kind of a distinctive interaction that we don't typically see in the book of Acts or really anywhere in the New Testament very prominently. So it's notable to see that. But I wanted to draw attention most of all to what's the most significant thing, and that is her devotion and how she works out her own devotion. So, if you're going to read with me, you can read with your phone, you can read with your Bible, you can look up here. We're going to look at Acts 16, and we're going to do just these 5 verses, starting in verse 11, about the story of Lydia. It says, "We boarded a boat in Troas and sailed straight across the island of Samothrace, and the next day we landed in Neapolis, for there we reached Philippi, a major city that is of the district of Macedonia, and a Roman colony, and we stayed there for several days." Verse 13, "On the Sabbath, we went a little way outside of the city to a riverbank where we thought people would be meeting for prayer, and we sat down to speak with some women who had gathered there." Okay, so they're going for it with an intention of talking to people about Jesus, and they've heard that there's this gathering of people that are happening outside of the town. So they go out there, and then they see, oh, there's this group of women that are meeting over here for prayer. Let's go have a conversation. So they approach this group of women in this segment outside of town. Verse 14, one of them was Lydia from Thyatira, a merchant of expensive purple cloth. Okay, purple cloth is not easy to make, like naturally, like we can make it synthetically today in a factory or something like that. But in the first century, it was hard to find the right material to make a purple dye. And so the fact that she had access to this is a big deal. Purple represented royalty and wealth and so on and so forth. So we see that Lydia deals with people who are of money and of importance. And so we see that she's this merchant, and she's here in this group gathering to worship. So it says, she was a merchant of expensive purple cloth who worshiped God. As she listened to us, the Lord opened her heart, and she accepted what Paul was saying. She was baptized along with other members of her household, and she asked us to be her guest. If you agree that I am the true believer in the Lord, she said, come and stay at my home. And then she urged us until we agreed. All right. This is a cool story. There's a few things I want to highlight in this story as we look through. And it's just a representation of what devotion looks like for Lydia. Just so if we're trying to figure out what we mean when we say devotion, because we like to talk about shared meaning, Lydia does a pretty good job of laying out what devotion looks like for us here. And so we look at this, and we see first, before Paul even interacts, before Paul and Luke approach her, that she's worshiping God, which means that she's a Jew. She's not necessarily a Christian yet. She hasn't heard this message of Jesus yet, but she's worshiping God as Jews would, or at least she's devoted to the Jewish God. We don't really know what her upbringing is. And then she listened to God, and God opened her heart. She listened for what God was saying, and God opened her heart. It's the next thing. And then the third thing we see is that she accepted what Paul said. So these three things: she worshiped God, she listened, and then she accepted what Paul said. And so these things is kind of like the sequence that we see that represent her attitude of devotion. That she already had a posture of eagerness to seek God for who he was. And then she actively listened, that she didn't come to God thinking that she had all the answers and she had it all figured out, but she actively listened. And then as a response, she was willing to accept and respond to what Paul was teaching as a result. This is an expression of her devotion, that her worship reflected how she responded, her listening reflected how she sought more about him, and her acceptance of what she heard reflected her willingness to intentionally decide her commitment. We can learn from Lydia's example in this passage of Scripture in Acts chapter 16. We can consider how to open our own hearts to our own response to what God has taught us already, like what he's already ministered and imparted to us. We can also posture our hearts and our own seeking for what God has to teach us, and then our willingness to make a decision in response to what he's trying to teach to us. So I think about this passage of Scripture, and I really appreciate what Lydia is doing here, because for many of us, we've never really had an experience like Lydia's had. That Lydia eagerly is seeking after her expression of worship, the way that she's most readily understood it. And then she's challenged with a new way of thinking, a new belief. And she has the option and the responsibility to decide if she's going to believe it or not. Many of us have never really had that opportunity. Maybe some of you have, but most of us have been born into a society or into a household or into a culture that has taught us to think and believe certain things about God. But there is something pretty significant about having the opportunity, and we can really kind of synthetically create this opportunity for ourselves. So I have this question that I think is fun to ask that most people don't like when I ask, because it's a little bit discomforting to think about this, and some people might even argue that it's irrelevant. But I'm going to ask this question to you today, and maybe you can just stick it in your pocket, and you can chew on it as your week goes on, and as it normally would, and think about if this is real for you. Would you believe in Jesus today if you were born someplace else? if you were born someplace else, would you still believe in Jesus today? If you were born in northern India, where it's predominantly a Hindu population, that's a Hindu belief system, would you believe in Jesus today? If you were born in Japan, where Buddhism is normal, would you believe in Jesus today? If you were born in Iran, where it's Islam, or Russia, where it's atheist, would you believe in Jesus today? Or would you actively seek in a heart of devotion for what is true and real and available from God? See, what this does is it challenges us to think, am I Christian today just because I happen to be Christian to start with? And if that's the case, then that's probably going to be a reflection on our measure of devotion and our authenticity of devotion. But a person who has to make a decision to believe in something that's not natural to their culture and heritage, that devotion is authentic. It's genuine, isn't it? Because it costs something, and it's real, and it's decisive, and it's inconvenient. And so maybe it's good for us to think about maybe what it would be like for us to live if we put ourselves in a different society and to arrive at the conclusion, would we arrive at the conclusion that Jesus is the right way of thinking about things, that he is the right God, he is the one true answer? Or would we simply say, well, everybody around me believes in Islam or Hinduism or whatever it might be, so that must be the right way. It challenges us to think about what we believe about Jesus, what we believe about Christianity, what we believe about our own expressions of faith. This question prompts us to consider if our devotion is the result of a decision like Lydia made, or simply due to immersion, that we were just kind of dropped in a particular moment in time, and we are the beneficiary of that convenient outcome. If we believe what we believe simply because the people around us do, how real can our devotion be? So there's a question. There's a kind of a concept that seems in my circle we come to ask this question a lot, and it's fitting. So last week I wasn't here because I was running the Houston Marathon with Jesse and Heidi and Alyssa and a whole mess of other people who run because I taught them to run. And they kind of pressured me into run this marathon that I wasn't really interested in running. But we did it together, and it was great. Kind of. So I have kind of this circle of people who run, and we've asked this question before. When does somebody become a runner? What is the difference between somebody who calls themselves a runner and somebody who runs? Like, when is the thing that, like, is it when they get the $120 shoes? Like, now I'm a runner. Is it because I have a Garmin watch? Is that what makes me a runner? Is it because I have all different bright-colored dry fit t-shirts? Is it like, what is it that causes me to be a runner? And the conclusion I've come to is when the runner decides that they're a runner. Like, when they've decided that they have become a runner, that's when they're a runner. And there's a mentality shift that happens between the person who just says, well, I run sometimes. That's something I do. It's an activity I participate in, versus this is part of who I am. This is part of the way that I live my life at this point. So I say this because it's transferable to the idea of, how does somebody know if they're a Christian? When is a Christian a Christian? Or when are they just doing Christian things? When are they behaving in Christian activities? And when do they say, this is who I am? When does somebody become a disciple and not just behaving in disciple-like activities? Now, this really speaks to the idea of what real devotion is meant to be. Because sometimes we think that devotion is the activities. And in the same way that an outsider might say, well, that person looks like a runner. They're kind of doing runnery things. So they must be a runner. But they're just doing it because it's what they see on Instagram other people doing, And so in church, we can do that same kind of thing. Like, well, I'm supposed to read my Bible. I'm supposed to pray every day. I'm supposed to go to church. I'm supposed to give into the offering. I'm probably supposed to volunteer in kids ministry. I'm supposed to go, I'm supposed to go to the Bloom conference and, I'm do these things and then it's going to count. And then it's going to add up and then God's going to take all of my activities, he's going to put them on the scale and he's going to say, you're way more Christian than you were last week. So you're doing great. Keep it up. Do this every week and I'm going to keep you in good standing. And it becomes this like really gross version of Christian devotion that is built on our activities and not out of our abundance of heart of love and desire to seek the things of God. So I use this illustration to just try to help us think about what it looks like for us to live out our devotion out of our own decision and not just out of a place of immersion because it's convenience. The richness of real devotion is discovered in knowing the person of Jesus. And then as a result, deciding to follow him. Its richness of the real devotion can be completely lost and abandoned in the mimicking of Christian behavior. When we just get to the place of mimicking Christian behavior because it's what we think we're supposed to do, then we abandon all of the richness that comes from the devotion that God wants for us. There's a difference between a devotional life and a life of devotion, isn't there? There's a difference. There's the same words, you just rotate them around and you get a different meaning, a devotional life and a life of devotion. A devotional life describes our behavior. It's like, this is a portion of my life. This happens to be my devotional life. This is my family life. This is my work life, so on and so forth. And it's a compartment of our life. But a life of devotion means that it's a life that affects every other aspect, every other compartment of our life. And when we encounter Jesus, the intent is not that we add another compartment to our life, a devotional life that goes along with our work life and our financial life and our family life and our social life and all those different things, but rather it becomes the overarching lifestyle in which everything else funnels through. So that means that the way that I work and the way that I treat my family and the way that I spend my money, everything funnels through first and foremost, my devotion to Jesus. This is what a life of devotion is intended to be. Real devotion is reflected not in what we do, but in who we have become. In the transformation that has taken place in our life, the change that takes place in our attitude, in our perspective, in our affections. This is the big idea Lydia is demonstrating here, that devotion is about who we are and who we are becoming, who we're being transformed into. And that we are becoming like Jesus, not because we're working really hard at it, but because we just want to be close to him all the time. And the closer that we draw to this man Jesus, the more that his values are transferred and become our values. You getting this? This is how the value transference happens. And when we're value driven, then we're receiving these values that Christ has placed within our heart, and his become ours, and we become like him naturally, organically. Not because we have logged a certain amount of hours of Bible reading. We're probably going to do that if we love Jesus, but it's not because we do that we become like him. This is the big idea. And as a result, we see the effect of her decision. So let's look. I want to look at verse 15 again, because we see some conclusive happening here. In verse 15, it says, she was baptized along with other members of her household, and she asked us, so Paul and Luke, to be her guests. If you agree that I am a true believer in the Lord, she said, come and stay in my home. And she urged us until we agreed. So what she's saying is like, we're a cluster now. We're the same, you and me. I believe what you believe what I believe. We believe the same thing. We love the same thing. We can love each other. We're the same. And Paul and Luke were like, well, that's not necessary. You don't have to do that. She's like, but we're the same. We're the same now. You need to come stay with me. You get to stay in my household. I will take care of you, and I will bless you so that you can continue to spread this message. And so we see like an immediate thing happen when she makes her decision and says, I'm going to respond and accept what you're saying. And she's saying, this is my choice. I'm not doing this because it's convenient. Really, what's really significant about this is that she's wealthy. She doesn't need Paul and Luke for this blessing and hope. She's not in a place of destitution and despair like we see many stories. She's prosperous. And so that gives us even more consideration to the fact that this decision that she made was authentic. It was for her. It was her choice. And as a result, she got to bring this good news into her household, and her whole household was able to receive the same good news, the same blessing. It says here that she was baptized, indicating that she was dying to her old ways and being raised again in this new life, embracing this teaching that Paul and Luke had been teaching them. So how can a person change the future of a household? How can a person change the whole trajectory, the whole forever, the whole generational impact of a household? And we see this in Lydia's story, and it's by living a devoted life to Christ. There's two ways we can do this. The first is most directly how you are going to affect your household. How you as an individual have been sent by Jesus to affect your own household, your family, your immediate family, your extended family, how your devotion to the Lord will permeate and affect your entire household. The second is by sharing your devotion as Paul did so that another might accept and it affect their household. So Paul and Luke, in their faithfulness, shared with confidence and with intention so that another household would be affected. This gives us some approachability. A lot of times in our world, we really want to be like world influencers. Like we want to change the world. We want to affect everything. Like how many Instagram followers can you accumulate? Like we want to get to this idea that we're going to change the world. And it's even a narrative that we see perpetuated from educators and in like our family dynamics. But what if influencing the world just started with influencing a household? Like, what if that's the real call that the Lord has for us? Is what if He just wants you to be faithful to your household and the household that are in proximity to you? What if that's what it meant to change the world? What if the cluster of Lifeline households took that mentality? And what if after generations and generations, the whole world was impacted because of our faithfulness and our willingness to be receptive to this call, not to go change the world and to go affect other countries and things like that, though maybe He will call you to that, but rather just to be faithful to the households He has placed us with and the ones He has placed around us. That's a much more approachable response. And that's what we see happening. That's the approach that we see in the New Testament. There's not any kind of initiative to hold like some mega conference in first century Rome so that all the people can hear the message of Jesus and respond and that the whole world can be changed in one moment. But rather it's a traveling from community to community, affecting household after household after household. This is how it looks. This is how it looks. All right, so I want to tell you a story that's very important to me. I've been doing ministry for a little while now, and I've been doing mostly campus ministry for my career. And over the course of, I've just encountered so many different people from so many different backgrounds. But if you campus ministry, you get a lot of people who are kind of like in this new stage of adulthood, and they're trying to develop who they're going to be and what values they're going to stand by. At our former church, we were pretty dialed in there, and the kids pastor at our former church, her name is Allison Medley, and she's a tremendous kids pastor, and she had been ministering to this family for a while and knew that they were kind of in a difficult situation, and so they kind of like started with the kids ministry, turned into be the whole church. They wrapped around this family who was living in this like little one-bedroom, roach-infested apartment up off campus in Denton. The mom had like a middle school education. She couldn't speak English very well. She didn't have a driver's license. And there's 5 kids living in a one-bedroom apartment. Just a really rough situation. No dad in the picture. And so they kind of just wrapped around her. They found her housing, and they kind of just found some resourcing. They provided new clothes and kind of reset their education system. Eventually, these kids grew up, went to high school, graduated high school, and went to college, starting at NCTC and then to UNT. And when they went to NCTC, UNT, they got connected with our Chi Alpha group, and these guys started coming to my life group. And so I've got a picture of Abraham and Josue right here. Abraham is right above me in the yellow bandana, and Josue is right to my side here. And so I don't know, Josue is probably like 19, Abraham's like 21 in this picture. And you can guess my age. This is we had like this retreat thing that we're going on. We were playing games and stuff. But this is probably one of the first years that these guys were in my life group. And I got to kind of be around these guys as they're starting on their journey of adulthood. Up to this point in time, I don't know all the details, but I think they have 4 older sisters. 3 of them were in the household with them. I think all of their older sisters and their mother had all had kids before they were married, before they were 20 years old. And so you have Abraham and Josue that are in college, first-generation college students in their family, and really have kind of all the cards stacked against them. And nobody in their family has a foundation of faith in Jesus. Like this is all kind of a new thing for them. And so this is really cool to see them work it out for themselves. And so they kind of came through. Eventually they became life group leaders in our Chi Alpha group. They probably took about 5 years to get through college. But Abraham first, I think they actually graduated around the same time. Abraham graduated with a degree in logistics, supply chain management, and business. Josue got his undergrad in political science. Today, I don't know how old, this is probably 10 years later now. Probably more than that. But Abraham is married. He's got 2 kids. He lives in Grand Prairie, I think now, maybe Arlington, somewhere down there. And they're plugged into a church. They're doing really well. He's got a stable job. His wife is a TWU Chi Alpha founder. She's one of the first student leaders there. And they're doing great. They're plugged into a local church. Josue just graduated law school, like second in his class at Texas A&M. And it is like night and day. Like what's going to happen now is that these boys' kids aren't going to know anything different because of their faithfulness. Their whole households have been transformed. Their children's households will be different because of what God did in their life and how he put individuals like Paul and like Luke who were sent to go tell this story so that a household would be affected. And maybe it didn't affect a 19-year-old at the time. Really, Josue was probably like 13 when this all started to come into motion. But it took, we're talking about 20 years. Time has passed since that initial interaction. But as a result, the generation will be different. The result will be different as an effect because of what God did to send individuals into these boys' lives that changed their trajectory. And so when I say, do you think that you can affect a household? The answer is you can. Yes, you can do this. If you are faithful in your own devotion, it will affect your household, and then it will affect the households that God sends you to be part of. I love this story. I love these guys. I keep in touch. I probably see Josue about once every 5 or 6 months, and we get together for lunch and just to catch up and process through things. Josue's plugged into a church up here on the north side of town. He's married, has a little boy that's probably just about a year younger than Cameron. And so we kind of connect over that. And it's a blessing for me to see what this next generation of children is experiencing that they didn't get to experience. What they had to navigate through so that God could bless their generations to come. What if it was like that for us at Lifeline? What if we could recognize the households in our proximity and be so devoted to the Lord that it would come out of us and would affect those households in the same way, that generations could be affected, that the world would be affected, not because you're such a great influencer, but because of your faithfulness to serve your household. That's what devotion looks like, folks. That's what devotion looks like. Today we get to celebrate a different expression of devotion, and we're going to have a moment where we get to celebrate a baptism. And so just a minute, I'm going to work my way there, so if you two can kind of get in position. I want to talk just for a moment about Jesus, that what makes Jesus worthy of our devotion? Why him more than any other faith? Why him more than any other person? That he has proved his devotion to us by his expression of generosity. That he came looking for you. He came looking for you not so that he could give you a grade, not so that he could give you a rebuke, but to bring you a gift, and one you didn't deserve and one that you can't pay back. He came at his own expense, and it cost him his own life, just so that you and also your household would receive the full blessing of belonging to God. This is the message that Lydia heard when Lydia was sitting there. This is the message that Paul and Luke spoke to her. And today, that we get to make that choice for ourselves. We get to decide for ourselves if this is going to be something that we are devoted to because we want to, or because we are immersed in it and because it's convenient. Someone in our Lifeline cluster here has had a Lydia moment where they've been challenged to think for themselves what they believe and if they will be devoted to the Lord. And they made the decision, and in turn is ready to be baptized. And so I want to invite Sumant to come forward. I think can we get a microphone too? I don't know if they've got one. Great. Sumant and Parker, if y'all want to go ahead and kind of wander out here. Good deal. And you can kind of just get in position. I just want to take a second to recognize what baptism is. Baptism is, more than anything else, an entry point into the household of God. When we see it demonstrated in Scripture, we see that the baptism is the immersing into the water, signifying the death to our old life, and then raising up again as if we are born again into a new household. That we are no longer born into the ways of this world and the way that we naturally were assimilated into the world of sin and brokenness, but rather we are born again spiritually into the household of God. And so when Sumant is taking this expression today, it's a step saying, I no longer belong to the ways of this world. This is my entry point into this household of God. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to let Parker first just share for a moment about what he has seen God do in Sumant's life, and then I'm going to let Sumant share about why he's made this decision today.
Yeah, so I met Sumant about 2 years ago, probably in about a month. It'll be 2 years almost to the day. I just met him one day outside the Union. It's like, hey, you want to play Uno with him and some of his friends? And that's how I met him. It was just some white guy on campus and said, you want to play Uno? And that's how I met him. Still know him 2 years from now. But when I look at Sumant and I remind of his story, I just reminded just how faithful God is. Lately, I've been reading a lot of Psalms, and one thing David repeats constantly in a lot of his Psalms is just how faithful God is to him and how persistent he is. And a lot of people say you have to chase after God, but you can't chase after something that doesn't move. You can't chase after something that doesn't run away. God's always chasing us, and man, this is the product of just a lot of prayers from me and Sasha over the last 2 years, and to see just how much Sumant has changed, especially in the last 6 months, is almost unrecognizable compared to the person he was then. And Sumant shared a lot of his family with me, his culture with me, and his food, even though it's very spicy, and I have a very low spice tolerance, and him and his friends have also touched me very much and have shared a lot with me too, and that's made me feel very, very blessed, and I'm very proud of what God has done in his life.
Sumant, you want to share just for a minute about why you made this decision? Why don't you come and step up right here on the platform here. Share why you made this decision to be baptized today and what God's done in your life.
I think I need like 5 minutes if that's okay. Yeah. So I would like to tell you a small story about a father and a son. A father who is a very good devotional of God. He used to believe him a lot. He has a son who doesn't believe him. During the childhood, he used to attend the Sunday schools and everything, but there used to be it's in his mind like there's no God. He used to behave as an atheist. He don't know why he used to behave in that way. So his father was really worried about him, like, why did my child turn this way? Like, he used to be so good when he was in childhood, but when adulthood, like when he turned out 15, what happened to him? He has no idea. So his son moved to United States. That's me. So I used to love a girl. She's very close to me. I was madly in love with her. So I don't know why she left me abruptly in the middle. No reasons, and I don't blame anyone. What happened was I was really scared about my father. Like, if there's anyone who is I'm scared of, is my father. That's how Indian families are brought up typically. So what happened was one day I got a call from my father while I was working at a gas station. So my father called me. It was early morning to him, around like 6 o'clock in the morning in India. So he called me and he asked me, "Are you doing fine?" Because he knows that about the girl and everything. He knows everything. So he asked me, "Are you fine?" I was like, I was confused what to tell. So he told me like, "Dear son, there is only one thing I want to tell you. Like, you are a man. I know you are depressed and everything. I don't say like you'll be okay and everything, but I just want to share you one thing, which is like, have faith, which I always say to you. That is the only thing which could help you." But those words didn't hit me hard. I don't know why. It's been 2 years since I have been in the U.S. For the first year, I haven't attended any church because of my negligence. So what happened was, in the month of September 2022, my friend Karthik and I, we invested in stocks. Almost like we lost like $15,000. So we have to pay the tuition fee, and we are just 25. We have education loan and everything. We don't know what to do. I was financially disturbed, mentally disturbed. At the age of 25, I don't know why I'm in this stage. Why am I going through this tough phase? So we just didn't invest in stocks like without any knowledge. We have a good knowledge in the stocks, but due to the market went down, that's the backfall for us. So what happened was, and also in the university, I got an F in a subject. For an international student, if he gets an F, it's really bad. So so what happened was, I met Parker, like while playing a Uno game. As he said, like, he's a white man. I was like, okay, let's make friends with him so that it'll be cool. That seriously, seriously, that was my first impression with him. So when I met him, we played Uno cards and everything was fine. So later what happened was, he started inviting me to Chi Alpha, which is God's place. I was like, what is he doing? Like, is he trying to influence me? I told him like, I'm an atheist, Parker. I don't believe in God. So please don't involve into this. But he was like, he always used to back me up, like, come to the church, come to Chi Alpha and everything. So that's how our relationship started. After getting an F and having the debt of almost like 15,000, I'm so confused. I was so confused. Then one day, during that phase, what happened was, we used to pay back the debts and everything. I and my friend Karthik, we used to work at gas stations like 7 days. We used to go in the morning 10 o'clock to the gas station, and we used to come in the night at the 10 o'clock. So 12 hours in the gas station itself, no food. We barely slept because of all the depression and everything. So one day, I don't know why, while I said like it's been 2 years since I came to the US, although I was an atheist, I had my Bible in my luggage bag. I don't know why. I don't know why did I bring that. So I took that Bible, I sat in my room, I started reading it. I called Parker and asked him like, I want to come to church with you. So that was the first incident which happened like June 2023. So he took me to Thousand Hills in the beginning. It was great. Then later we came to Lifeline. But after coming to the Lifeline, it's completely different because the people here I met, Matt, Coit, Daniel, Nathan, and also Larry, Steven, Rob, Donnie. These people, they're like, we used to meet in the Bible hubs and everything, like live groups. That had a great impact on me. We used to share different perspectives. And I love the way how Dylan leads the crew and everything. So at that moment, I decided, like, as my father said, you need to have faith. Or only that which can help you. So the only answer which I had is that when the girl left me without any option, I thought of God. I felt like the girl was me, and the God is the girl was me, yeah, and the God is him. So I left him abruptly without, I don't know why. That is the reason I think like God sent someone into my life, made her pass away, and and now I really love sharing my time with God and everything. So this is my story. All I can say is like have faith. The deeper the faith, the deeper the problems you have, and the deeper the problems you have, the greater the capacity you will gain to bear the problems. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead. Perhaps for some of us, there are individuals, if we prayerfully set our heart right, that there are open-hearted individuals in our life that are ready to receive the message. And if we just, in obedience, respond and deliver that message and invite them to join us in the household of God. I'm going to pray for us today, and I'm going to let the Lord speak to you about what your response is. But I want to pray a prayer blessing that we would be effectors of households because of what God has done in our life. And at the end of service, I've asked a couple of our Lifeline family over just to come up front here. And if you feel like the Lord is ministering to you and maybe you need to make a response, maybe you need to express your devotion, then they want to pray with you today. If you're here today and you say, I want to make a decision, I want to be baptized, I want to be devoted like Lydia, like Sumant, just take one of the prayer cards on the back of the chair in front of you, and you can fill that out, and you can deliver it to the Welcome Center, or you can bring it to one of our staff. And we would love to pray for you and talk about what that looks like for you for next steps. But I want to pray this prayer blessing over you and over us as a cluster of households that we would be able to embody this message today. Pray with me. Lord, thank you for your grace and your mercy. Thank you for your blessing that you have extended in this household, this family. God, thank you for the story that you shared with us today in Sumant, that he is a blessing to this household. God, continue working in him and through him. And as you set a foundation of faith of what this looks like in devotion, I pray for those who are in this room today, in this house, that you would minister to us, that you would prompt us to make a decision for ourselves. It would not be one out of convenience, but it would be one out of transformation, that we would hear the message with open hearts and you would minister and speak to us. And God, I also ask that you would begin to reveal those individuals in our life who you want us to share this message with so that their household can be affected as well. Stories like Abraham and Josue, how generations can be impacted, how the world will ultimately be affected through your faithfulness to us. We bless your name and we ask for your blessing in our life. Amen. 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 Lifeline, pray blessings on you today. May the Lord cause you to be fruitful and successful as you go about your week. And may he help you to be disciples of Jesus who make disciples of Jesus. Amen.